what is the true value of having access to airport lounges? Well, I think this benefit is pushed a lot in the points and miles community as far as this card gives you access to the most lounges, American Express Platinum, but other cards give you access maybe if you fly on a particular airline and you can have guest access to the airline's own specific lounges. That's true with American, United, Delta. And there's all sorts of different lounges available. And depending on whether you have one of those lounges in your home airport or whether you have a lot of layovers, a lot of factors can come into whether or not those are truly valuable. So what I want to share with you is from a live I did last year where I kind of broke down all the questions I have when evaluating if lounges are valuable to me. So I hope this information is helpful to you. Thank you for being here. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and let's look at the true value of lounges.
There's just a lot of discussion about airport lounges in the credit card space. And I'll be honest, some of it is a little bit irritating to me. And the reason for that is that I think a lot of the discussion about lounges is aimed towards people who don't travel much and who maybe have never experienced lounges very much and think it's such an awesome idea, which, let me be very clear. I think lounges are awesome. I think they're great and I love them. And it's one of my favorite things about the travel game. So I'm not disparaging wanting lounge access, but I do think that there's a realism to it all that just doesn't work its way into some of the content or some of the discussion. And what I mean by that is that if a person is traveling twice a year, okay, how much is that lounge access actually worth? I mean, you could go sit down at a nice restaurant in the airport, pay $20 or $25. And if you do that twice, it's only $50, right? In a year. So how much is it worth it? Because I want the lounge access to have the American Express Platinum card and pay $695 and coming up $895 a year. Is it worth it to them? Well, I think people are like, well, this is the elevated lifestyle. Almost like there are some circumstances that are sold that way that are kind of true. Like for instance, the Hilton Aspire card, you can sell it on the point that you get an uncapped free night certificate. And you can use that bad boy at a Conrad. You can use it at a Waldorf Astoria. You could use it at a beach, with the over the water villas if you can find availability, right? That's just pretty amazing. And so that is like, yes, if you have this card and pay that $550, you are going to have at least one night where you're going to live like the 1%, right? Like the other people. And that's awesome. With lounge cards, when it comes to lounges, like, oh, look at those lounges that people go in. That is so great. And they are great. I'm not arguing they're not, but it's almost like it's sold the same way. Like you can get this card and you can go into lounges. And yeah, but the Hilton free night certificate pays for itself just one night. You can't go into a lounge one time and pay for that card. Now, you can, I know there are other credits and you're offsetting and all that, but I just don't think this is looked at deeply and kind of fairly in some of these ways. So I just wanted to talk about all things lounges. I have several slides prepared, and that's what we're going to dive into. But determining the value of lounges. Okay, here are 8 questions as I was thinking this through, and I'm like, how would a person determine, is it worth it? Am I getting value from these lounges on my particular credit card? Or especially if you have multiple credit cards. So how would you determine that? And I think there's a lot of factors. So these are the 8 that I came up with myself. How often will I use them? In other words, how often do I fly? That is really important. Person who fly, the more you fly, the more lounge access is going to be valuable to you. It's just a fact. The more you fly, the more valuable it is because you'll be able to use it way more often. Okay. Unless you have one that's got limited, like you said, the 4 on the US Bank card, I think their altitude reserve had like 8. And if a person's like, or like this CSE has 4 American Airlines and then Priority Pass, you might say, well, I only fly about 4 times a year. And then that's perfect. But you've got to think about how often I'll be able to use them. What does that mean? Number two, what airlines do I prefer to fly? What airlines do I want to fly? That's one that's really I've been struggling with, because I prefer to fly an airline that I really shouldn't fly, as far as if I want to do the value. So I prefer to fly Delta. I really like Delta. I love the Delta Reserve card, even though I'm getting rid of it, but I love it. There's a Delta club in my home airport. There's not an American club in my home airport, or at least the airport. I have 3 airports I can get to in about the same distance, but none of them really have a departure club except that one that has a Delta. And so there is one that's a little far, maybe an hour farther, and it has an AA one. But still, when I look at that, I think, wow, which one? Well, I like to fly Delta. I like that. But here's the thing. When I fly Delta, especially on paid tickets, which are work tickets, then I'm earning Delta Sky Miles. And it's like, I don't want to earn Delta Sky Miles. When I fly American, I'm earning American miles. Those are a whole lot better. And so I've got to ask myself, which airline am I going to fly? Because that's pretty important when you're trying to determine which card and which kind of access you need. Then you have to ask number 3, what lounges are available on departure? Just like we mentioned a moment ago, what lounges are available on departure? How accessible are they? In other words, what is the proximity to the gates? So if I land, from my experience, how far do I have to go? How much time does it take for me to get to a lounge? And let me tell you, the more you fly, especially if you fly for business, that is like super duper important, because I'm trying to get where I'm going in the shortest period of time. So I schedule the shortest layover. So on a 30-minute layover, you cannot switch 4 terminals away. A 30-minute layover is too tight, but it happens sometimes. And on an hour layover, which is very typical, you really can't do it either, especially if there's a wait at that lounge. But if there's a lounge 3 gates from you, you can hop in there for 15, 20 minutes, get something to eat, something to drink, get some value, and then go. So that's important. What's your proximity to the gates? Number 5, what quality do I assign a lounge? In other words, how good is that lounge? I mean, all lounges are not the same. Let's be very clear. Oh, wow. My player 2 would tell you fast. The worst lounge we've experienced on planet Earth, the crowning jewel of bad lounges, is the Hawaiian Lounge at the Maui airport. It is so very bad. You know what they had in there? Water, and they had pretzels and Cheez-Its, I think. And no bathroom, and maybe some chips, but no bathroom. No bathroom. That's it. And the seats had tears on them. It was so bad. But that is very different than going to the Turkish lounge in Istanbul. Those are not the same things. Lounges are not made the same. So it might be worth it to get a little better lounge a little less frequently. You got to kind of weigh all of that stuff. So then you ask, what quality do I assign lounge? Number 6, what is my value floor for a lounge visit? In other words, what is a lounge visit actually worth to me? And to me, this is not the same with different lounges. So my value floor, in other words, almost any lounge I go into, with the exception of that Maui lounge, because chips aren't worth this, but for the most part, every other lounge I go into, I think it has got a floor value of about $15. Okay. So because I'm going to get something to eat, at least a snack, I'm going to get something to drink. And if I bought a soda out in the airport, it's going to be $5 for that, or $7 or whatever. And for people who go up to the bar, it's going to be even worse. So all of that, to me, the floor value, the lowest of the low, with the exception of that one in Maui, is $15. That's for me, but it might be different for you. And then what dollar value will I assign a specific lounge? So then you got to say, yeah, but are they all at the floor, or only certain ones at the floor? In other words, is the business class lounge, the Polaris lounge, the same as the United Club? Maybe one's more valuable than the other. And then you got to ask, what is the typical wait time for a lounge? Because the lounge that's the best lounge in the world that you got to wait 2 hours to get into on an hour and a half layover, is suddenly not the best lounge in the world. Because guess what? All you're going to be able to enjoy is the outside of it. That's it. That's all you're going to be able to enjoy. So to me, these questions are all essential as we're determining value for our cards in regard to lounge access. So I'm going to give my own, it looks like the slide's messed up a little bit here, but you can still read it. I'm going to give my own answers to these things, just kind of show you the process of how you work through this stuff. So question number one was, how often will I use them? Well, this is my velocity. In 2024, my player two and I and friends and guests and people that we took with us, and this number is kind of a little skewed because it does include lounge access at hotels. Like I have diamond status with Hilton, so we did go into some of those lounges, but it's a very small amount of this. So probably 95 plus of this are airport lounges, but we went into 102 lounges. Now that velocity is because sometimes we were taking big groups with us. We took kind of a big trip with some friends, and we took all of them into the Priority Pass Lounge, and then I took several into the American Lounge because we had 2 layovers on that and all that. So it's not just that I personally went 102 times into a lounge, but my cards provided 102 visits. So that's what happened last year. This year to date, and this is with no hotel lounge access. So this is all airline access, and we're getting ready to go on a big trip. And so we're going to have a lot more. But as of now, 74 to date in 2025. So I think the Rewards Master probably needs lounge access. Don't you think? I mean, I use it a lot. So what airlines do I prefer to fly? So this is kind of the next question. So evaluating what I've done in 2025, I think that was actually supposed to be 2024, but whatever. 38 one-way flights, 14 American paid flights for work and et cetera, and consulting, stuff like that. 4 Delta paid flights for work and et cetera. 2 United international flights this is this year. I'm sorry. This year, what I have planned. 2 United international flights on points, and that's not really on United, it's on Lufthansa, but we're just repositioning from one city to another, so I paid for that on points. By the way, that is a smoking good deal. 6,000 points each. If you ever look into reposition in Europe, United's got really good prices on that. So just so you know. And then 7 international business class flights. Now this is doubled numbers though. This is just for me. So when I'm player 2 on those international business class, she's going with me on all those. So that'd be double that number, but still I just trying to give a basic overview. 7 international business class or premium economy flights on points. So that's how much we fly. I think that's quite a high velocity flying. So that is a lot of opportunities to use lounges because, total of 38 one-way flights. And so if you figure really all of those have a layover, that's at least 38 times, not counting the times that you could go when you're on arrival. So if let's say 10 times, that's 48 times, but oftentimes there's 2 of us. So, 48 times, who knows how many, and sometimes I have other people with me. So that's quite a high velocity. So I'm just trying to illustrate for you how you'd work through these questions to determine the value for you. Determining the value of lounges. The third question I had was, what lounges are available on departure? So for me, my closest airport, there's a Delta Sky Club, and there is an airport that's a little farther away. When I say a little farther away, it's about an hour farther away, and it does have an American Admirals Club. But is it worth it for me to drive an hour extra to have a club on departure? And the answer for me is nada, no way. Not unless I just need to fly, to go to that airport for scheduling or whatever. So that's what I'm considering on that, but that's really a less important question than some of the others. Number 4, how accessible are they? Proximity to the gates. Now this one is very, very, very important. How accessible are they? So what I mean by that is when I fly, and sometimes you won't learn this except through experience, but when I fly, when I land, if I have an hour or hour and a half or whatever it is, how close are the clubs for me to get to before my next flight? And so what I have experienced is this: AA, Delta, I should have put United there too, because this is true of them too. AA, Delta, United, and escape lounges are super close. Now, the reason I said escape lounges is the airports I've been in with escape lounges, they are right inside security almost every time. So, and usually they're small airports that you can get to any gate in like a 2-minute walk, right? Or 3 or 5-minute walk. So escape lounges, I'm going to put in that group too. So AA, Delta, United, escape lounges, super close. So that needs to be factored in as well. Capital One is almost always for me in a different terminal. So I usually, if you're flying into Dallas Fort Worth, it seems like I'm never flying into the D terminal. And that's where the Capital One Lounge is. I'm always flying into the B terminal or the A terminal or whatever, but never into the D terminal. So I got to go to a whole different terminal. When it comes to flying through Denver, I'm hardly ever flying into that. Usually I'm flying through Denver. I'm flying United. That's a different terminal than the Capital One Lounge. So in my estimation, it may be different for you. That's why these questions are tailored to everybody's got to answer them for yourself. Like, for instance, if somebody's starting in Dallas Fort Worth, I mean, that would change the equation on the Capital One. But for me, I've got to change terminals. I got to have a pretty long layover to get over there. So Capital One's in a different terminal. American Express, so the Centurion Lounges, I'm going to say variable, because I have found, this is strange, but sometimes they're super far away. Sometimes they're not that far away. So in my experience, American Express ones are better than Capital One because they're variable. Sometimes they're a little bit closer. And then Sapphire and then Priority Pass dining are, they're an infrequent airport. So what I mean by that is that I very seldom fly through airports that have a Sapphire Lounge. Now I do when we're flying overseas through JFK or whatever. And I did see one going through Philly recently, but it's very seldom. The other thing is I can't really bank on Priority Pass restaurants, which I love me some Priority Pass restaurants. I try to use that anytime I can. And I can't bank on that because not every, in fact, few airports seem to have them. So that has to be considered as well. What quality do I assign a lounge? Okay, a 1 to 5 scale. And this is my answers. This doesn't mean that would necessarily need to be your answers, but these are my answers. So on a 1 to 5 scale, international business class lounges, I give a 5. I love international business class lounges. Getting ready to stay in one myself, coming very soon. And in fact, we're leaving this next week on a big trip and going to be going in some of the best lounges they say in the world. I love them. I love them. But you can only, it's hard to count them because you only get access when you have that certain ticket. So, but they're the best. Capital One and International Priority Pass. Now, I'm designating a difference between international and domestic Priority Pass because there is a difference. Those are not the same deal, right? They're not. So in my experience, Capital One and International Priority Pass are a 4.5. Now, some of you are probably going to disagree. Some of you are going to think that Centurion Lounges and Sapphire Lounges are as good as Capital One Lounges. But in my estimation, in my opinion, right or wrong, I think Capital One Lounges are the best lounges in the United States. I just like the way they do their food, and you got all these different type of themes, and just the layout of the club's really nice, I think. So Capital One and International Priority Pass, they're also very, very good for 4.5. So Centurion and Sapphire will be right under that at a 4. I love Centurion Lounges, and some of them will be a little less and some of them will be a little better. What I love about Centurion Lounges are the ones that have like carving stations, which they sometimes have. I mean, they're great. Sapphire Lounges, to be able to order and have an extensive menu to order, and the waiter brings it to you. That is just incredible. I love that. So I give them a 4. Priority Pass restaurants. I love me some Priority Pass restaurants. I love, love, love flying on United through Houston because usually if I have a long layover, I hit both restaurants that they're in different terminals. So it takes some time, but I love going to Landry's, and I think it's called Cadillac Mexican Grill. So one day I had a long layover. I had a big meal, $28 meal for me, $28 meal for her, $56 at Landry's. And then we switched over terminals and had shrimp fajitas for both of us at Cadillac Grill and paid nothing. It was awesome. So over $100 in great food. So I love Priority Pass restaurants. I rank that at a 3.5. Delta Sky Clubs, I rank it a 3. They're really pretty good. They're they're better. They just are. They're better than AA clubs. They're better than United clubs. And I put those at a 2.5, which is acceptable. I mean, 2.5 is fine. I mean, that's fine. And then escape lounges, I put them at a 2, and that to me is acceptable too. And then the hardest one is domestic Priority Pass, because they're just such a spread. So I say from 0.5, which would be the one in Maui. I should have put 0.1 or something because it was so bad, but it is still just slightly better than having to sit at the gate. And up to about a 2.5, some Priority Passes are better than others. So that's kind of how I estimate those. And your numbers may be very, very different, but I think it's important to know this, because if you're determining, is this card giving me value, you've got to know, what's the lounge worth to me? What do I think of it? Am I getting a good lounge or not such a good lounge? Because these questions all factor in. What is my floor value for a lounge? Well, for me, it's $15. That's the floor value for me. So I would have spent at least $15 out in the airport in almost any situation, even for a snack and something to drink. So that's my floor evaluation, but it might be different for you. So what dollar value will I assign to a specific lounge? Well, this one, it looks like I'm missing some of my slide here because of the way it's doing. But this is how it breaks out for me. Priority Pass, Escape, American Airlines, United. I think those are all worth the floor value of 15. That's just my evaluation. Delta Sky Club's a little better, 20. Priority Pass restaurants, I give those full value. Those are worth $28 because I always spend it up to the max. And it's not overpriced. It's the price on the menu. So that's a true $28. And you can't really see the rest of this part down here, but Centurion, Sapphire, Cap One, and International, I think I put those at 30 or maybe 35. I don't know. We'll see on the next slide. But those are definitely better. So I give different values to each of these lounges from my own experience. Like I said, going to 102 of them last year, that was been my experience. What is the typical wait time for a lounge? Again, I'm sorry these slides didn't work out the way they're supposed to, but AA, United, Escape Lounge, and Priority Pass restaurants and international lounges, in my experience, there's no wait time. Now, somebody might say something different on international, but for me, there's no wait time for those. I never have that wait time at any of those. Now, escape lounges, if you go to some of the escape lounges where Southwest is flying out a lot, I have found that those have a wait, but in the 2 airports I fly into with escape lounges, I'm never flying on Southwest, never, ever, ever. So when I fly in there, I'm flying into the other one and I've never had a single wait. So AA, never a wait. United, I've never had a wait at a United Club. Now, if you have just a day pass, you might, but if you have full access, I usually don't. Delta Sky Clubs and Capital One, 15 to 30 minutes. And Centurion and Sapphire, my experience has been 30 to 45 minutes. So maybe some of you have had a little different experience with that. And then, so my value per card. So this is kind of putting together, since we're at the end of our time, putting together everything that I've said here. City AA Executive Card, I went 25 times last year in 2024. So at $15 at the floor value, that was worth $375. So that helps me to evaluate that card. I mean, that card more than paid for itself because I got this. I got the $120 Grubhub credit because I use that every month. And I got the $120 credit for Avis. I did not get the Lyft credit because it's dumb. It's the dumbest credit in the world. But I did get those two. So with the $375, $475, $575, I got over my value for what the card costs, the $595. Easy. Delta Reserve, 25 visits at 20. That's worth $500 right there. Not counting your companion certificate, not counting all your credits. So that was, to me, that's valuable. My City Prestige card. I had 15 Priority Pass visits. 10 Priority Pass visits at a floor of $150. I went 3 times to a Priority Pass restaurant $84, $234. So that helps me to understand the value I'm getting out of my Prestige. And since I used 2 of the fourth night frees and the $250 travel credit, I would get way lots of value on that. Capital One Venturettes, 6 times 30, because I think those lounges are better, $180. And then American Express Business Platinum, which I don't have anymore, but I did all last year. Went to Centurion Lounges 4 times 30, went to Escape Lounges 4 times 15. That's $180 value. So that helped me to determine, well, you can use this if it's helpful to you to determine lounges, but that's kind of what I wanted to focus on today.
Thank you for joining me today for this breakdown of lounges. I hope the information's been helpful to you. Please consider my channel memberships. I have RM Insiders. On my RM Insiders tier, I put out my videos early for channel members, and I do weekly members only videos with strategies and tips and just thoughts about credit cards. But then I have my Spreadsheet Warriors. That's my highest level tier. And on that tier, it's for true experts. And in this, we have about 12 or so that are already in that, and we meet once or twice a month by Zoom with direct conversation where we can ask questions and learn from each other. We always talk about tips and tricks that aren't out there in the public domain to help us to really play the game at a high level. So if you want to consider each of those, look at the join link below. Thank you for being here. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you here next time.